Hi, everybody. Happy summer. It's great to see people here at our July Parks and Rec meeting. We only have 4 of us here tonight, so we won't be able to approve the minutes, but we will hold on to those June minutes if we had a chance to look at them, and we'll approve them at our next meeting, which won't be until September. We do not have a meeting in August. It's a good reminder. I don't know how I can do that. How's that? Better? Okay. So I think what we're going to try to do tonight, since we have a special, the feasibility study presentation, I think we'll pass over the reports and come back to that if that's okay. And let's introduce our Rob from Garrett Fleming, and he can get us started on going through the feasibility study for the stable at Fener Woods. Thank you, Rob, for coming out.
Thank you for having me. Can everybody hear me? Might be a little loud. So I work for Garrett Fleming. I'm one of their senior project designers, and we were contracted to do a feasibility study for the existing stables at Fener Woods. What we're going to go over tonight is our project understanding, some historical site and site context, some key architectural elements, the existing versus new construction. We'll show a conceptual floor plan, conceptual elevations and renderings, recommendations for plumbing and HVAC, a review of the hazardous materials that are on site, some issues with sustainability, an opinion of a probable cost, and then we'll take any of your questions. So our project understanding was to basically provide some concepts for Fener Woods. We started off with 3, and as you can see on our flow chart here, we did a site visit, we did reality capture, and began to develop a model and started the review process. So we basically did an iterative process through the concept stage and then through the budget stage, and then we ended up with the presentation that you're viewing here tonight. One of the other aspects was to provide facilities, restroom facilities for park visitors, provide a conceptual option for a nature education space. Another option that came out of that, which was not requested, but through our studies we found that this might be an opportunity, was to create a gathering space within the building, and then provide storage for park and recreation equipment, and then utilize the existing Fener Woods building to the greatest extent possible. So our design focused on preserving key architectural and site elements. So basically what we're going to do is keep all the exterior stone walls, keep the existing entry columns that you see in the photo here, maintain the existing views, and maintain the existing streetscape. We're going to provide new roof lines, the new cupola, new cornice and roof details, retaining the existing historical aesthetic, but not providing a false sense of history. So when we go into greater depth with these elements, as you can see, we're going to keep the roof details. We're going to make them with newer materials so that it can't be misconstrued that this was an actual historic piece of the building. We're going to reimagine the cupola. We're going to look at the courtyard space and basically reimagine the exterior walls similar to what is there with their board and batten facade, similar stable doors, and then we're going to basically recreate the roof as it exists now, similar slopes, similar things like that. And then we're actually going to go through and replace most of the historic windows with new wood frame windows that resemble the history but provide new thermal protection and things of that nature to make the space more comfortable. So when we look at the existing conditions plan on the left, the next plan over is the demolition plan. The lines you see in red are what we're keeping. That's basically the exterior perimeter stone walls. We're going to keep them intact. Unfortunately, due to years of exposure to the elements, most of the wood construction is beyond repair. We did do a structural assessment, and most of it needs to come, almost all of it needs to come out, to the point where it's not feasible from a cost standpoint to keep any of it. So we're basically going to do a full gut. And then we're basically going to, as you look at the next plan, provide restrooms in the wings, and then we have that large interior space, which we'll talk a little bit more later, And then the image on the far right is a 3D axonometric. So when you look at the conceptual floor plan, the main area that you see there is a large gathering space, which we're looking at not necessarily doing a full fit out. It's something that came through the iterative process that you could actually use this space as like a classroom space, not just a storage space. The main focus is going to be the restrooms. Now the restrooms will be, you'll notice they have two entrances, one so that they can always be used from the exterior, and the door to the main space can be locked. So that way they're always accessible. It's not just when that interior space is in use. These are some conceptual elevations. As you can see, it's pretty much bringing the building back to what it looked like. We didn't really want to stray too far from that aesthetic. We understand that the residents of the township really love this building, so we didn't really want to try to reinvent the wheel. We just kind of wanted to bring it back to its glory days. So the next set of slides is going to be some of our conceptual renderings next to the existing photography. So as you can see, we're changing some window sizes, we're changing some doors. It's not going to be as stable anymore, obviously, but we're still trying to keep that feel. So there would be an entrance to one of the restrooms. We're trying to maintain that stable aesthetic with the typical doors there and then the board and batten details. We will need to add a sidewalk for egress. The space, from a code standpoint, is over 50 people, if we would use that as a teaching space or a gathering space. So we do have to provide a sidewalk. And then here is another elevation. As you can see, it's pretty much just bringing it back. Here's some conceptual renderings of how it could look on the interior. We are not putting a second story back on this building. We're going to keep it open. We're going to use heavy timber construction. So that way we're using renewable sources. We're not going to bring steel or anything like that into this building. We're going to keep it pretty much historical type construction with new technology. Here's some rendered floor plans. That could be different table setups. And then when we get into the plumbing, so currently we looked at different avenues for plumbing, whether using composting toilets, vaulting, and what we've come to look at is that traditional plumbing is the way to go. We can run a line through the park fairly easily. I'm not an engineer. That's being done by a separate firm, but we did look at that. So putting a septic system on site's not advisable either. We think we have the means to actually do normal, traditional plumbing here. There's a lot of cons when it comes to vaulting. In particular, we'd have to undermine the facility to put a vault in. There's maintenance concerns with vaulting. Composting toilets, similar. They're a good idea in new construction. They're very hard to retrofit into existing construction. So HVAC, there's a couple different options. We had started out thinking that we were just going to do natural ventilation, put operable windows in. We have a cupola, so we have the opportunity to do stack effect to cool the building naturally. What you could also do is do large fans from the heavy timber construction, or if you really wanted to condition the space, you could do mini split units, similar to the Dakin. What's nice about those is they can be strategically placed to be hidden because the only thing that you're passing through the wall is the piping. So the condenser could be outside, you'd have the wall unit, it keeps the aesthetic clean. The hazardous assessment, basically every interior part of this building is covered in mold. The roof's been in disrepair for a while, so water's infiltrated. There's not a lot we can do with that. It's, like I said, it's going to be a full gut for the first and second story. Other hazardous materials, we have asbestos. In the floor tile, we have transite panels. There was a furnace room that has asbestos-containing cement. So all that stuff needs to be abated before we do this. And then the last remaining thing is lead-containing material. So the whitewash, white paint that's on the outside of the stone has lead. It's fairly easy to deal with. You scrape off what is loose, and then you do an encapsulation process. So it involves encapsulation paints, primers. It's very easy to take care of that lead. So sustainability, what we're looking at, like I said, we're not going to put steel in this building. We're going to use heavy timber. It's a renewable resource. One of the things that could be done with this project, if it were to go forward, is we look at what type of timber we're using in the heavy construction, and we could plant the same amount of trees that was used to create that timber in the park. So that way you're increasing your trees, which I know is very important, but you're also offsetting that carbon footprint from actually taking those trees and making them into heavy timber. The other thing that's interesting about this building, and there's a movement somewhat to do this, is life cycle cost analysis in a building. We always do that in a new building. Like, how much does it take to pay back this building? What carbon footprint does it have? What embodied energy does it have? Well, you already have the building here. So you have all that masonry that's already intact. So you're already offsetting that carbon footprint by reusing this building. We're not talking about mining new masonry or anything like that. It's already here. So when you're looking at a sustainability issue, reusing older buildings is a very sustainable feature. And now we get into where everyone's going to probably want to hurt me. We're going to talk about the opinion of probable cost. So this first number here basically looks at the restrooms, the roof, the heavy timber construction, and the window replacement. So we're not talking about finishing out that big gathering space yet. So we're looking at all in $800,000. Now keep in mind, these are all very high level views of this. We haven't done anything where we're counting windows and this window counts that much, costs this much, or that door costs that much. So keep in mind that these are very high altitude costs. Also, COVID has completely thrown the building market all over the place. It's very hard to get these estimates. So if you'll notice, we're carrying a 20% contingency. We're carrying escalation for next year, knowing that this isn't going to be built this year. So we're trying to basically encapsulate all those costs because it's better to have extra money than it is to come up short. And as I said, in the process of this feasibility study, we noticed that that gathering space could be something quite special. So if you wanted to finish out the gathering space, you're looking at $1.3 million. And the reason a lot of this is you want nice finishes. You don't want to necessarily skimp on the finishes. You want this to last. So a lot of the finishes have been brought up. So that's one of the things that we're trying to take into account, that market fluctuations, what type of finishes may or may not be in the building. So we're erring on the high side of things. But who knows, in a year, this could be right on, this could be off. We don't know. So keep in mind, this is a very conceptual look at this building. I just want to thank you for letting me present to you, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Oh, thank you so much, Rob. Can we hold the questions because we really want to get them all. Before we go to public questions and comments, this was a lot to take in a short amount of time.
Understandably so.
So we so appreciate your time coming out tonight. Tammy, you've had a little more time than we have to look at it. Is there something that you would like to add to this board about this study and this presentation that you think would be helpful to us?
Not at this time. I feel Rob covered a lot of it. I know he had an opportunity to become intimately familiar with the building, spent a lot of time in the building, and I feel that, he's taken a good objective approach on everything. I think tried to present some options to us that sit there. So I don't have anything to add at this time. I think we're still digesting it as well, and obviously interested in hearing what the board has to say and questions and things, and recognizing too that these discussions are going to continue. And I apologize, I'm still in my mask. It's just I do have a bad sinus infection right now. It's not COVID, so that's why I'm masked and I'm sounding muffled, so I apologize for that. But again, I think, we want to keep the conversation and the dialogue going, so just want to ensure that folks know that it doesn't stop tonight. This is something that we want to continue to review and evaluate and hear from members of the public.
Okay, thank you so much. And before we get to the public's comments, anybody on this board would like to ask a question of Rob? Okay, go ahead, Andy.
You mentioned about keeping the exterior walls. Is there going to be any kind of reinforcement needed or any kind of, sorry.
That'll be something that when we get into design, our structural engineers will need to look at. Looking at them right now, they're 1.5 feet thick. Most of the load's going to be taken by the heavy timber, as I would see it. We've tried to anticipate some of that and added some columns that are along the walls. So if anything would probably need reinforcing, we would be tearing up part of that slab to actually put piers to take that load and not necessarily relying on the existing masonry walls for everything.
Do you have, as part of your analysis, did you look at sort of like the anticipated future life of those exterior walls, or no?
We didn't, but I mean, they're masonry walls.
they're thick.
They've been here forever. I mean, as long as, like I said, we get rid of that lead paint and we encapsulate them, and you just start doing your general maintenance with that when the building actually starts to be occupied, I don't think you'll have any issues with that.
Okay.
It's one thing about historic masonry is it tends to, unless there's a seismic event, because it is unreinforced, it tends to pretty much be pretty long living.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I'm good. You go ahead.
Thanks very much for the presentation. A question about the gathering space.
Sure.
Do you know what the dimensions are of that?
Not off the top of my head.
Understood. In terms of the cost differential that you cited here, what is the non-built-out space look like that gets us to the $800,000 number as opposed to 1.3?
I would really think that number's mainly the heavy timber, because what we want to do is future-proof this building, right? So we looked at using other construction methods. Like, we could go in there and actually put in a standard roof truss, much cheaper than heavy timber. But the problem is you're not going to get that aesthetic. You're not going to be able to use that space in the future. So that $800,000 option is basically the heavy timber, the roof, the windows, the restrooms, basically no finishes in there. So we would paint maybe to encapsulate that lead, maybe seal the concrete, things of that nature, but that space would intentionally be blank. But say 5 years down the road, you think, oh, we could really use this gathering space. You're set up to actually have a project that just goes in and put finishes in.
Okay. So the alternative plan to the finished space is just an empty concrete slab.
Correct. With the heavy
Four
timber,
walls.
yeah, basically what you saw in those renderings, just
Okay.
no drywall furring out or anything like that. It would just be what is there now,
Okay.
basically with some paint.
Any cost, you said that future costs are considered in terms of trying to maintain all the wood. I assume that the board and batten is going to be, in fact, wood, the windows are wood.
We can look at alternative materials. It doesn't have to be wood. There's plenty of manufactured materials like, Zytec, things of that nature that you could use. Now, that's probably going to be a premium to wood, but that's also something we've tried to encapsulate in these costs. Like I said, very high altitude, but we definitely want to make sure that you understand what the costs could be.
Thank you very much. That's all I have for now. I will hold up the works here.
I have a question about, you mentioned the historic value, that you wanted it not to be construed as it would be a historic building. Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by that and why?
So when we look at that, I get into a lot of this with my other clients that I deal with, some historic buildings. And the topic that always comes up is a sense of false history. So by the time, this building's going to last well beyond us if we build it right, correct? So we don't want someone to come back and say like, oh, well, this is a good historic example of this type of building. So that's why, like, leading into kind of segueing from you, we're not going to necessarily use wood, because then that automatically signifies that this is not a historic building. That's kind of what we want to get away from. Mimicking the past is okay if you're like restoring a building. In this particular regard, we're reimagining this building. So we want to keep some of that historic aesthetic, but we don't want it to be confused that what we're doing is actually historic.
By saving the walls, is that economically?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, that's the one thing you can save out of this building.
Since we're not going for historic, or
Understood. I see. I can understand. Absolutely.
I just don't know
So,
what the difference is.
I think you have to start to weigh the opinion of the public versus what you keep. And we understood from a very early portion of this project that this building's important. So I think my original design impetus was to see what we could keep, and it just really turns out that that's really all we can keep. But, if we design this building in such a way, that won't necessarily matter. People will be able to tell, like, okay, this is 200 years old. This is new plastic wood that was added later. So.
Will those stone walls need maintenance over
Paint,
just paint?
yeah.
So not,
Yeah, unless there's major structural issues that we can't really anticipate. Unreinforced masonry tends to do very well unless there's a seismic event.
okay, that makes sense.
And I,
Okay, that's all I had on this board. Howard, did you have? Hit the mic.
I was saying the historical value of the building and whether or not they wanted to maintain that. The highlighted walls there's no mold on those from the inside?
not to our knowledge, no. And masonry can be cleaned when you really look at it. That mold's not going to penetrate through a lot of that paint or that mortar that's on there, and we should be able to clean that off if there is any mold. From the report, I believe, which I do have a copy available if we need to look at it, I believe it said pretty much all the wood ceilings and the tile had some mold on it, but tile can be cleaned too. But the problem with the tile is the asbestos. So I would think that those interior walls can be cleaned and encapsulated the same way we would do with the lead paint, because they are going to have to be conditioned anyways.
Right, okay.
If I may, one more. Just, maybe it was a very rudimentary question, but you mentioned maintaining the existing streetscape. I assume you're referring to just the paved areas in the immediate vicinity of the stables, or are we
I'm actually talking about the
larger-
road that runs behind.
Okay.
You know, yes, this sits really low. It's got a low profile. The hill kind of comes up. But when I say streetscape, I actually mean that view that as you're driving up, you would see this restored building.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much, Rob. We really appreciate you answering the questions. How about somebody from the public? Anybody like to come up and ask questions? Make a comment? Mr. Kearney, thank you.
Michael Kearney, 124 Walnut Avenue. I'm very pleased to see this plan. I mean, it very much is in keeping with sort of what I had in mind anyway. And again, I would just, to the point made, the building is historic, but it doesn't, it's not Abraham Lincoln's birthplace, right? So it doesn't have to be restored to a point in time, right? But it does need to reflect sort of the historic landscape that's been there for more than 100 years. And so I think that's really good. I'm a little concerned about having the budget numbers being quoted without any additional context, because if we choose to do something else, still have to have restrooms, right? Still have to have a pavilion, or we're not exactly sure. So there may be compensating things that we would choose not to do in order to get sort of what the net. Right, I'm most concerned about what the net additional cost would be, because this, it's my understanding, compared to the amount of available funds, this would take a good chunk of it. However, if you would spend part of that chunk either on a new pavilion or on restrooms sited, sewer-attached restrooms sited somewhere else on the property, that would be a compensating cost. So really knowing what the delta is between the two options, I think, is real important before anyone can make a decision.
Tammy, can you remind us of what we have earmarked for funds for this park?
Yes, at this time, it's approximately 1.7 million.
Thank you.
Thanks. Jim Higgins, 603 South Devon Avenue, Wayne. Just wanted to thank the board for Tammy for hiring this really gifted person. I'm really impressed with this presentation. I think Paul and I were back there, like, we just really love everything you had. I feel like you really nailed it and really understand what those of us who've been involved with this for a long time really want out of this place. And whether it's not feasible is somebody else's decision, but really excited about, I just absolutely love your plan. So thank you very much for really the passion around it. I appreciate it.
Gretchen Grobel. You had mentioned about the sewer hookup. Do you have a sense of would that hook up to Eagle Road, or where?
I can kind of show you. I can
Okay.
point out on this map. So there's another engineering firm dealing with this, but So if we look, hopefully you can see my cursor on here. So here's Fenimore, here's the stables. We feel that we can actually connect down here is the closest sanitary connection. And basically that can be done hopefully without removing. So the nearest connection, and pardon me for not knowing all the roads around here, but what is it? Paul Road. So that's the nearest sanitary connection. Now, we haven't gone through design or anything yet, but from looking at the grades, we'd either have to use a grinder pump, which is standard, to pump everything down there, or we think we can use gravity fed. Now, the nice thing is there's a road that's running down to that, so we won't really have to mess with any trees. At least is what we're seeing now. Like, that could change when we get into the actual design if we have to move something or move a tree or take a tree out, but we're thinking we can go down that road. There is a bridge. That is the one caveat to this, is we don't have all the information to get under that yet. So basically we've looked at it, but like I said, this is very conceptual, so we're trying to catch all those little strings that are coming out of the project, but that's the plan right now. From what we saw on the municipal maps, no. The sanitary now currently runs to possibly a cistern. We don't know. So we obviously don't want to go that route. So from looking at the municipality maps of the services, that's the closest.
Cameron Azarano, 243 Willow. I second Jim's comment. Thought it was an excellent presentation and just fun to actually see the possibility. I guess my question would be, why wasn't septic an option? I think you mentioned it, but I think I missed it.
So when we look at different options, one, we didn't perk test this area yet, so we don't even know if it'll percolate correctly. The other concern is there's not a big enough area necessarily for a drainage field. The drainage field will probably have to be pushed off towards the residents to the right, and I don't know if we really want to do that. But the first step to the septic system to make sure it's completely not valid is a perk test. So that would happen in design. So there are still avenues open. It's just for this particular site, we're not recommending it. If you have the ability to connect to a public system, like we do here, that's the way to go. Because you also have maintenance concerns with septic, so we're trying to cut down on any of the park's maintenance, try to keep that to a minimum.
I have a quick question, if it's okay. Over here, sorry. And I asked this of Tammy earlier, but I see the chimney still there. And I know there won't be a physical reason for a chimney. I'm assuming you kept it for a historical reason?
It doesn't-
And that seems expensive to me and potentially not necessary.
That is something that can be removed. We kept it. I don't think it's original to any of the construction. That furnace room was added later, obviously. This is most likely an unheated building back when it was constructed. We just left it for right now. That is something that is not, going to make or break the design. If we wanted to remove it, we could. I don't really think it's going to change the aesthetic. It might actually improve the aesthetic if we remove it.
Well, so where do you go from here?
I will defer that question.
Well, after we hear this presentation, we certainly need to have conversations about it, and it eventually has to go to the Board of Commissioners, where they will review it with this board's recommendations and go from there.
Thank you for this presentation. It's awesome. This is a long shot, but just curious if there's any way to estimate what it would cost. To Michael's question earlier about like the cost of what the alternatives might be, I'd wonder if over the course of your assessment you reached any kind of determination, and I realize this is a long shot, but what it might cost to to demolish the building?
Demolishing is probably going to be cheaper, but it depends on what you want to build back in its place. If you wanted to build something like this back in its place that has the same kind of character, you're ultimately going to be paying more, I would think. You have the walls there. It wasn't really, it was discussed, but it seemed to be kind of off the table just because of this building's, effect on the community. So yes, you could demolish it and put some, prefab system or something like that in for cheaper. But if this building is that important to the fabric of the community or the community itself, then that warrants a discussion about keeping it. So that's kind of where our design team went with it.
Oh, just if I may, I mean, it's not necessarily an apples-to-apples comparison, but we know in 2019 when we built a prefab unit at Emlyn-Tunnell, it cost us $560,000. So I don't want to create an anchor in any way, but just for an evaluation sense for today's conversation, that's the last bathroom that we've constructed. So when I say constructed, it was a prefab, but it still required a significant amount of construction because we had to run all new sewer to that particular facility. So just to give a little bit of an idea of where we were in 2019. If we think that there is an option that, demolishing, if there is an appetite for that, which we have not heard, just to kind of echo what you just said, Rob, if there was an appetite for that, it's something we certainly could go back and reevaluate, but this was where the road had taken us.
I just wonder how it all fits together with everything else that people want to do, with the playground equipment, with the nature aspect of it, of the pavilion, and how do you fit that all in when you discussed this, you've got a certain amount of money, so at what point do you then say, okay, what are we going to do everywhere else, and how much does it cost? And I think that's what you were talking about, Michael. And I wonder if there's a sequence of thought process that you're proceeding with, and if you can tell us what it is.
Our thought process is to hear from all of you as to, that you're right, there is a certain amount of money. Tammy just told us of 1.7 million, so if we're spending 1.3 in, what did you say, 40 degrees of, of a high level.
40,000 foot view,
Which,
yeah.
That leaves basically 400,000 for the rest of the project. So how do we feel as a community? How do you feel where would you like to see that in priority? Would you like to see the stable be the priority?
Maybe put a finer point on that is the reason this study was done was because we, in a meeting probably 6 or 7 months ago, thought that in order to figure out the larger scale plan, this was the elephant in the room that had to be at least examined and addressed because something either has to be done with it, demolishing it, or trying to do something like this. So that was the first step in this latest phase of the process, was to figure out what are the options there, and that's where we are now. And then I think we have to move on from there to see what the impact might be on the larger scheme.
If I may also, I'm sorry, aside from the trees, the historical preservation overall of the site was the next most important thing that we looked at. So I think when we had a lot of our initial meetings, we started to prioritize. And we had the dry erase board in the room, and we started writing some things down. And tree preservation obviously was number one. That sat on that list. Historical preservation, including this building, and possibly other features within the park were the next thing that were the most important that the community had discussed. I know we talked about the pond and some of the restoration in that area too. But that's kind of how we've been looking at it. And Bill, to your point, it certainly was the elephant in the room that we needed to understand because it's such a large piece and can determine where we go from there. So I think setting and staging those priorities is going to continue to be important. And I don't want to assume today that those are the same priorities. We did meet in November, so maybe, something has changed along the way. So I think as we continue the discussions, we want to determine what those priorities are and work into the budget that way.
I'm Doug McKeown. One other thing what we've done here is we're able to be building shell and then a tenant fit out for the space. We could theoretically do the shell for $800 or $850K, and then do the rest of the stuff and prioritize fitting out the space inside at the end. And by doing that, you would have much more flexibility.
All right. Can I just jump in here real quick? So I agree, this plan looks terrific. I love it. I am worried about the costs for a bunch of different issues. Starting with, if it's 1.7 and we spend 1.3 on this, we have 400 left. But it's not 400 left because we have contingencies with inflation. I don't know if you all saw the data today about inflation. Your pavilion's gonna hit inflation, a number, labor, the playground, et cetera. So everything else has to be apples to apples, not apples to oranges. That's number one. To Tammy's point with Emlyn Canal, the going rate is about $800,000, I would think, if you want a new bathroom, which is crazy because you see them build mansions now for $500,000-600,000 on a $400,000 piece of land. I like the idea of keeping the bathrooms there. If you do have that workspace, I think maybe one idea is to find a partnership with one of the universities there, Villanova, Cabrini, Eastern, Valley Forge, Mainline Night School, the school district. Those are the 5 or 6 in my head, as well as we have a community here that could use that, could help absorb some of that cost. I do worry about if you do build for the 1.3, that is going to tax our staff a little bit more. I know that Tammy does a great job with really dealing with all these parks with the very, she's got three other employees under this. And we are dealing with the Willows and stuff like that, where it's like, this is just one more piece, and it's like we keep building and building and building, but we may not be taking care of what we have already, and I just don't want that to burden our public works, as well as Tammy's staff or anybody else. So that's what I have with this pavilion, but if there is a chance for a partnership or a grant or something, absolutely take a look at it. I do worry about that stone, to Andy's point, or I think it was Andy that you said that. I mean, I don't know, does stone get brittle if it's not patched right? I mean, I know that the paint can keep some of the moisture out, but will that stone, I mean, like everyone's picked up a stream stone and you've snapped it, and I'm worried that some of that field stone would be brittle, or no?
Without doing a full structural analysis of that, I can't really say.
Okay.
That was something that would come into with the design, is there would probably be a core taken to make sure that everything's okay with that wall initially.
Got it. And then 2 more points. The lead paint. So I believe that you had to stop using lead paint. I'm guessing 1981. I think that's 81 or 83.
That
so
sounds
that
about
has
right.
Not,
78.
So 78. Okay. I know it's right around there. So my guess is that has not been painted, hence encapsulated, quote unquote, since 1978. And then finally, with the HVAC system, I don't want to even go to the sewer system, but the HVAC system, that means that we would need to have someone there every day or 2 in the winter to double check that that's working. There's no pipes that are breaking, et cetera. I mean, I guess you can do that remotely. You could put a camera in there.
So that actually came up in our design. And when we looked at the restrooms, you'll see that some of those, basically it's hard to put pipes in a masonry wall. So you'll look at the way the restrooms are set up, they're on the new side.
Okay.
So we actually started to investigate the insulative properties of that wall to make sure that any pipes in that wall, we are accounting for that thickness of wall in this concept to make sure that everything was playing out. So that is something that we thought of. to try to make sure that we're encapsulating that heat within the building already, even though it's not going to be heated, so that you don't have that issue.
Okay.
We'd have to explore it further in design, but we were thinking about that.
Okay, and then the sewer, if you connect that sewer from that building to the sewer, is that factored into that 1.3, or is that an
Yes.
addition? Okay,
I
that is.
believe so, right, Tammy?
Okay.
Yeah, and that 1.3 is actually all the design fees as well, if you look
Okay.
at that last slide.
So
that's,
that wouldn't create a problem with EPA? Because you're getting pretty close to the stream and the, like digging up, trenching, that won't create a problem?
that is
with
one of the things that would have to be broached at the time of design when we actually float that option by the township and EPA and all that.
What's the worst-case scenario for the cost on something like that?
I'm not an engineer, unfortunately, I can't really
Okay.
talk to that.
Okay, all right. I mean, the plan looks great. These are the questions that I have that would make me feel more comfortable. Thanks.
Just one point of clarification. The $800,000 one also includes the sewer, correct?
How were we intending on connecting the bathroom that was planned? The sewer?
The same way, running to Paul Road.
Sorry, I just thought of one more thing I'd say. I think it's important to maybe not focus on the 1.3 number, even though it was there. I think it's really a cool concept. I think your idea of partnering with universities, the classroom idea, to me it kind of sounds like even potentially a rentable space where people could have special dinners, or I don't know. That's just what came to mind for me. But I think in terms of what the community, from what I've heard at all the meetings, have spoken so much about, is not just about the historical preservation of the park, though it is a historical park. It's preserving the park as it is. And that includes the bathrooms where they are, the pavilion where it is, the playground where it is. And so I just wanted to kind of make that clarification.
One additional question as we're
Sure.
chatting here. The version without the build-out space also includes HVAC. Is there a need for an HVAC system, to Commissioner's point on that?
Not necessarily. I mean, you're going to have ventilation in the restrooms from an exhaust standpoint. You could put that in we kept that 55,000 line item in there just to encapsulate that cost, but that could change. If you just wanted to do heating for the restrooms, you could change that cost. It's not going to be 55,000 for that.
Can you retrofit for HVAC? So you.
If you're going to use one of those split systems, yes, that's one of the beauties of those systems, because if you think of, like, we've all seen window air conditioners, right? You have this big unit in a window. So what a split system is exactly what the name says. It's a split system. So you have the interior piece that is all of basically your ductwork, right? The only thing that you push through the walls is the refrigerant piping. So you could easily core a wall at a later date. They're used a lot in retrofitting. I had them in a historic house I used to own.
More question with the HVAC. So would it be gas? Would it be heated by gas, and are there gas lines there?
We didn't get quite down that road.
No.
A lot of these mini splits are electric, because they don't, for that size space, I don't know if you would really need, gas would obviously be more efficient, but I think you get away with electric depending on how many cubic feet you need. But like I said, that would be something we'd look at in design. I don't believe there's gas lines there currently.
There is not.
One other point, talking about HVAC, if you're using a split system or something like that, you can also ground source heat pump to provide heat. And that's a very efficient system because you're not actually generating it, you're capturing it. And yeah, she's right about the baseline we should be thinking of is 800K, not 1.3.
Okay, if there's any more comment, really appreciate everybody coming out. And Rob, thanks so much for the presentation. It's a cheer. I'm cheered to have it and see it. We've been talking about it for a lot of months, and really gives us a perspective to work with.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, why don't we continue on in this, in our old business? Tammy, can you give us an update on Odorosio Park and where we are with that at this moment?
At this time, we want to continue to hear from members of the public. I don't know if anyone was here tonight to talk about Odorosio Park. If so, we definitely want to have an opportunity for them to speak and give us some feedback there. I know we started some conversations several months ago. We've had a few more focused meetings, and we had a meeting at the RTCA a couple of months ago to continue to hear feedback. So we would like folks to continue to reach out to us to join our interest mailing list. I know at each of our meetings coming up for the Parks and Recreation Board, with the exception of obviously August, we don't have a meeting. We're going to continue to keep this as an item on our agenda so we can hear from members of the community. We had some discussions about meeting again to have a more focused meeting either at the RTCA or on site so we could walk and talk and look at the park and start to discuss a lot of different ideas for future improvements there. So we do want to continue to encourage folks to tune in and obviously join the interest list. That kind of segues to our next conversation. I know the item on the agenda, if you want me to just kind of jump right into that and tackle
Please.
that. Unless anyone wanted to speak on Odorosio, we'd love to have them come forward and do so. Thank you. We really appreciate that, Ms. Azarano. Appreciate the comments and happy to hear. I know we've had some folks reach out to us that I never really see folks playing basketball down there, but now it sounds like it's really starting to pick up, which is awesome. So I'm really happy to hear that. So just in light of the discussions that I know that we have that are coming up about Odorosio Park, I just wanted to reiterate the Park Impact Fund that we discussed heavily over the last several months, really going back starting as far as in January. I know we allocated money towards Enke Park for the resurfacing of the playground and the installation of the sunshades and the roofing systems there, which made up a portion of the money that is allotted in that fund. But also just to reiterate and take this as an opportunity to state that the balance of those funds was recommended by this board to go towards Odorosio Park. For a portion of the planning and design that may go in ultimately for what might be desired for that park, and then perhaps even a portion of that funding would be allocated towards maybe even part of the project if we get that far. So I just wanted to reiterate that recommendation that was brought forward and that commitment that was brought forward in the motion by the Parks and Recreation Board. So I imagine at this point, until we start to get into design, you know, we probably don't have to keep discussing that. I don't think there was an appetite for this board to allocate funds towards any other projects, at least at this time, until we sift through Odorosio Park a little bit further.
Well, thank you, Tammy, for that. Would you please remind us of what that fund amount is that's left after Enke?
After Enke, there would be approximately $275,000 there.
Does that include that initial set-aside fund from 4 or 5 years ago, because contingent as part of some building project?
It does, yes.
That was 125?
$125,000 that was allocated from the Wayne Walk builder, which was Submergent.
Thank you. And I know this board has been talking about Odorosio now, and we're kind of ramping up, and I'm hopeful that we get to it a little bit more clear focus on where we're going with Odorosio in this next school year for sure. Thank you. All right, how about Willows? Do we have an update? Well, if people were here tonight, I know that there's some sentiment out there that the issue with dogs in the Willows Park has been continued to be pressing all of us in how best to accommodate all dog owners, all dogs, and all park users. So if there's any comment in this room, we'd love to hear it if you have something to add on dogs in the Willows Park as we continue to collect information on that. We are going to be moving forward in some capacity, but we would really like to get it right for as many as everyone in the community.
Is this on? Thank you. My name's Doug McCone on Poplar Avenue. Unfortunately, our dog passed on at the age of 13 about a year ago, but her favorite thing to do was run wild, off leash at Willows Park. And I understand that there are people that are concerned about having them all leashed and so forth, but it is the one place where dogs and the people who live them can do this. So that I would hope that we don't require leashes on all dogs. Okay, I'm sure that we can come to some sort of agreement or arrangement or something like that.
Thanks, Mr. McComb. Any other comment on that tonight? Tammy, I know that we have some public comment that comes with an email. Is that something that you want to share, or do we, how does that work?
Yeah, I don't think that's something we've ever really done,
Okay.
but, be happy that as we get deeper into these topics to,
Share that, or
encapsulate some of that.
Or
yeah.
compile it as a way, so that we can have information as what's out there?
I will check in with the manager on setting that precedent.
Okay, all right, I don't want to set a precedent, I just didn't know if there.
Absolutely, I have to understand where the protocol is with that.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Claire, can I just jump in here for a sec? So the really, and I think I mentioned this to Mary at the last meeting, I think that the big, the elephant in the room there, I would love to hear from Howard Holden, and I would love to hear from the caterer, because they're really the biggest stakeholders there. So there are other places to take your dogs, Hartford, or where even Emlyn Tunnel, you can have it leashed, you can walk around. But again, I'm beating the dead horse of if you spend $300,000 on a wedding and some dog, the bride steps in waste, or so having them come, or at least having them have a statement, or contacting you, or just coming here for like a Q&A, that's really something that would make me feel comfortable, and that would definitely influence my decision, or possibly change my thoughts and my feelings based upon what they have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Fari. I agree that would be, I'm sure we all agree. Does anyone have anything to say? Is that we do want to collect that information from the Willows and stakeholders there as the best way to coexist with dogs in the park and
My comment, the place that our dog Jigsaw used to go was always in Skunk Hollow, not directly the Willows. The two are linked together. Perhaps the solution is to put some kind of dividing line, a fence or something, so that they can run in Skunk Hollow, but it will never get over to the actual Willows proper. I mean, that might be a reasonable way to, because I certainly understand that. $300,000 for a wedding? I spent that much for a house, so.
thank you.
Sarah Pilling, 29 Garrett Avenue. Having spent many years with the garden, I think one of the big issues that hasn't been spoken of, I have seen dog walkers with 6 or 7 dogs piling out of a car, and they're going to walk them, and they walk across the Willows. Years ago, you were leashed on the Willows property, and once you got to Skunk Hollow, you were allowed to take them off leash, or you never came by the Willows. You went up off the parking lot and through the woods. But I think an issue when you have people bringing 5, 6, 7 dogs, and none of them are leashed, none of them are under control, is a really big issue. So I know it would be difficult to limit it to bring 1 dog or 2 dogs, and I don't know how you're going to follow it and maintain any kind of an ordinance that you do, but I think that's the big issue. I know when I was involved with the mansion, the front door would be open because you wanted people to come in, and you had wet dogs in the house, and that really is a no-no. And you also had big dogs big friendly dogs, I get it, but they come up and they jump on people, and that, Susan Michelson really wasn't very happy with that. So I think something needs to be done. I have to say, I think it's 7 or 8 years ago, I brought the whole issue of dogs in parks to the Parks Board, because in the past, there was just a big sign that said, no dogs in the park, $1,000 fine, which was a joke, because no one ever got fined. I have little dogs, and I live next to Emlent and Elfield, and my little dogs were very valuable on their leashes with little kids who came to the games, because my dogs were getting socialized, but the little children were getting socialized, so they weren't automatically terrified of animals. And dogs, particularly since we've been through COVID, they're not dogs anymore. They're members of the family, and I think somehow we need to accommodate that issue. That I know I would not have made it through COVID if I hadn't had 2 dogs in the house with me. It got really lonely. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for your consistent care of our community for many years. Okay, I guess we can move on, so that's something we'll be revisiting as well. I guess we can move on to our board in our stewardship. Is there anything anybody has to report for the parks that, nothing? I will say here that the parks that I visit every day and check out have been maintained so beautifully. We're so fortunate to live in the community where parks, and they're used. I mean, you go over to Beau Connor and Philippone, and it's just teeming with people. It just really warms my heart personally. So I appreciate all the work that the Township maintenance does, Ricky and folks, and Tammy as well.
Thank you. We'll pass that along.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we can circle back now for some reports. So if, Tammy, if you wouldn't mind, I know we won't hold you too long for your voice, but if you could give us a synopsis.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Just real quickly, summer camps are up and running. We have Survivor Nature Camp going on over at the Willows Park, and we have Radnor Day Camp among Wizarding Camp about to begin. And I want to take this as an opportunity to really just thank the staff. We have a new staff and a young staff working, especially over at the day camp. You know, sometimes it's not to use the pun, but it's kind of like a new puppy. You know, with the job at working at summer camp, it seems real fun and, you know, exciting and all of that, and then, you know, you get there and it's a job, and, you know, and tack in the heat that goes along with it and all of that, and there's a lot of responsibility that goes along with having the kids looking up to you and having to lead and do activities and run at full energy, you know, for 7 hours straight. It's not an easy job, and I want to take an opportunity to really just thank the staff. We have a new director that's working over there, Gene Evans, who's doing a tremendous job. So I figured I would use this as a platform to just say thank you to them, and thank you to our department staff as well. Tracy Kroom, who's our program coordinator, has really stepped up to take on some of the program supervisor jobs and duties while Heather is out on maternity leave, and likewise Natalie Chaiko, who's our recreation assistant, has stepped up to take on a lot of Tracy's duties. So I just really want to thank them. You know, they keep the machine running and do a really fantastic job. And then just to echo your sentiments about the Parks Department, Steve Ledgerton is working as our new Parks Supervisor and is really doing an amazing job there with his team. So I just want to thank them for all of their efforts throughout the summer.
Thank you. How about Commissioner Fari? Or, right.
Thanks. So yeah, just a couple highlights. I want to thank Tammy and Ricky and Molly for getting Clemacrone Park in tip-top shape for that parade, the Garrett Hill 4th of July parade. I haven't seen numbers like that since pre-COVID, and that was a Monday, so a lot of times people take a 4-day weekend, but it was 1:45, I was at the dunk tank, and there were still 12 or 13 kids in line wanting to dunk me. So terrific, and to Bree and the rest of the committee that got everything going and cleaned it up. We came back at like 4 o'clock, and it looked like there wasn't anything there. So They kept the park beautiful, and it was just it was a terrific day. So I really want to thank all the staff that really spotlights and celebrate Clem McCrone, because it's just special, and it's great that COVID got rid of a lot of things, but they could not get rid of this parade, so thank you. Also, another Clem McCrone was Story Hour. Again, the Public Works crew, they get that tip-top, and so it's kind of like the whole community and all of staff is there. So you have, like I said, Public Works as well as the Parks Department, and also the police come. And so it was Superintendent Flanagan, Officer Pyree, and Officer McHale, and it's great. They read a couple stories to the kids. They get to climb in the police cars, and it's special. And I have a 6-year-old that'll be 7 years old, so I can tell you firsthand that it's wonderful. So not as a commissioner, not as someone that sits here, but as a resident, it's wonderful. So thank you very much for that. I did miss Odoriccio movie night. I tried to take my son, but it was a Friday, and he kind of was done for the week, so I could not do that. But I am excited to see about the wiffle ball, the night at the ballpark. That is, again, my 7-year-old. He's 6. He'll be turned 7 on that night. So if I can get him there, maybe not for the wiffle ball, but to do the fireworks, that's a lot of fun. So thank you to Tammy as well as the rest of the staff for really keeping that phrase that really is a great place to live. So thank you.
Thank you for that update. And let's just remind us of the date for the wiffle ball. Tammy, can you?
Sorry, for Night at the Ballpark and the wiffle ball event is on Wednesday. It's next Wednesday, July 20th, and the rain date is the following night on the 21st.
Okay, because that's always a great event. July
It is,
20th, Wednesday.
and we do have our fireworks back again, as Commissioner Farhi had stated, so we're really excited about the event this year.
Thank you.
What time are the fireworks slated to start? Just so maybe if they can't go, we can get a nice big crowd. And will the snack bar be open? Will Little League be running that, do you know?
So the fireworks, to answer your question, will go off at dark, approximately 9 p.m., 8:45, 9 p.m. If it's a little bit more of an overcast night, we can do it a little earlier, but around 9 o'clock. Sometimes, depending on light, we drift a little towards 9:15. And then as far as the concession stand will be open, Radnor Wayne Little League will be there, and we also have Hvac on board this year. They're going to provide some extra food and things. I know that some of the supplies have been worn down pretty thin from the baseball season and not wanting to reorder and having, long lead times on stuff. We did get Hvac involved this year as well, and the Kona ice truck will be there.
It's going to be another great, this is stuff that I don't know, and what I think is good is now becoming great because of all the other, stakeholders are outside that are just really helping this community and making it a fun night for families.
Agreed. Thank you. Howard, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to say Tammy did a great job with the Odoriccio Park thing. The movie went off without a hitch, and so many people that didn't send emails. She sent me a couple where people were happy, but there were just so many people there that said to me personally they enjoyed the evening. The kids really enjoyed it, and the basketball court was available for them. And I met some of the new neighbors in the town as well. So it was awesome again. That's all I can say. The only thing that some of them said that was it was a Friday night instead of a Saturday. But hey, you understand that. But it was, nevertheless, it was a beautiful night. And I mean, just to see the township come along and people coming out there having fun, and Tammy running up and down the hill like she was like a 17-year-old. It was a great place to be. So I just want to say kudos to you. Thanks, Tammy.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We'll share that with the staff too that supported us that night.
Thank you, Howard. Okay, so that gets us pretty much through. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm mistaken. So I don't think we have a shade tree report. We're not sure. We think maybe Miss Coe was at the last shade tree. So we're not sure.
was either Mary or Bill, I think, that had attended.
Okay, or Bill Quinn, okay. And do we have any volunteers of the four of us who would be available to attend a shade tree meeting in next August, or in August and in September? The dates, we don't have the dates. I don't have the dates in front of me. The one in August is at the end of August, I believe. Tammy, we don't have the dates in front of us?
I believe it was August 27th.
I think so, too.
I'm pretty sure. We can circulate the dates and try and
Okay.
get,
Why don't we do that? If we'll circulate the, okay, great. Why don't we do that? We'll circulate the dates for Shade Tree. I mean, we're still in the process of trying to manage a liaison between our two boards as it comes up. A couple things, okay? And that's it for reports. All right, and back to public participation. Is there any public participation this evening?
Can I just plug this in, or? I don't know.
Bob, somebody might need help with a computer. Mr. McCone, do you want to take the plug out of what's there and put that in yours? Is that what you were looking to do?
Can I do that? Try that.
Mr. McComb, can you use the mic?
Yes, forgive me.
No, not the other one. I think it's,
The handheld?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Okay. I just want, just plug it in? Flash drive. Make it much easier. Where is this stuff? Hi, my name's Doug McCone. On the 4th of July, we went down to Fenimore Woods, and this was the Easter egg toss. Can you see it, I hope? Not Easter egg, just egg toss. Okay, and it was great fun. It was great. It was great fun for everybody. It was followed by water balloons. I guess to wash the eggs off one's hands. And then there was a sack race. Kids had a great time. And finally, there was a three-legged race. And I even have a video of a piece of this in a minute. It's nice. Just wanted to show you that this park is used this way. And the most important thing is whatever we do to Fenimore Woods, we have to make it so we can continue to do this kind of stuff. We need to preserve the trees and the canopy as much as possible. Play areas used constantly. Operable bathrooms are essential, which of course we did. And that's actually a great project, I might point out. We need an accessible route. One of the big issues that's come up is people said, do we have to comply with the ADA? And the answer is, doesn't matter if we already do it. Okay, if you meet it, then nobody's going to have to worry about it. There is possible to do a wheelchair accessible route from the restroom area down to the pavilion and then down to the open play area and the equipment area. It's achieved by using walking paths similar to sidewalks whose slopes no greater than 1 in 20. Paths don't have to be straight. They can be nice and curved and wind in and out so you don't have to damage trees or take anything out like that. And once a wheelchair user is down at the play area, they can reach the pond quickly. Oh, shoot. What did I do? Yeah. This actually was prepared by our friend Mike Carney. And he broke it up into sections and he measured the elevations, and for most of it, you can see the areas that are in green, they all are less than 1 in 20 they're less than the 5% slope. There are a couple that are yellow, which are just at the edge of it, and there are a number that are in red further down the hill. But just as important, if you look here, he developed a possible path that goes from, this is the pavilion, and around the side there. And again, this is according to the topographical maps he got off of geographical, GIS, whatever. I'm retired too long. But now what I did, because I used to work, do accessibility stuff for the government, I actually made a scale and went out there and measured it myself today, and what he's saying is accurate. But the point here is that it is possible to do that without taking down any trees, which is a real big deal. And you wouldn't have to have ramps that have rails along the side. It's possible to do that. This is even, he was 40,000 feet, this is 60,000 feet. But there's enough information. But the important thing to me was you get to see how we use this thing. Shoot. Well, my next slide. Yeah, this is the one. It's about families in a natural environment here. That's what we want. Now, one more, if I can go back. If I can get back to the, don't save. This one. I love this one. You can't hear it, but there are people talking, getting ready, set, go. This is a three-legged race. No. I'm too old for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McCone, appreciate that. And it is wonderful to see people using Fenimore Woods.
I guess that's going to turn it off.
Any other public comment? All right, any comment for the good of the order? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody.